Thank you. Excellencies, thank you, Dr. Mark, General Director of the ICD, for inviting me to participate in this forum. I would like to take this opportunity also to thank all the members of the ICD, the staff, what they have been done for this institution, which makes the ICD today a respected institution in the field of cultural diplomacy. Thanks to the participants and the audience, thank my dear colleagues. According to the theme of the forum, the growing threat for democracy and the global peace, I'm going to give a short presentation on what are the threats to democracy in Sub-Saharan African region. My presentation is divided in three parts: introduction, secondly, what are the setbacks of the democracy in Sub-Saharan region, what are the threats to democracy in Sub-Saharan African region, and the conclusions. As you know, Africa is 45 countries recognized by United Nations, second largest continent in the world, second most populous continent with 1.2 billion people, and is the fastest growing and the youngest in the world. Sub-Saharan Africa is the region of African continent that lies south of Sahara Desert with 44 countries and about 1.1 billion people. One thing, we are talking about the threats in the war. We are talking about the nuclear situation in the world. I don't know if you remember that today is anniversary of the creation of the Agency for the Energy Atomic. It was created in 29 of 1957, and the headquarters is in Vienna. So we can interrogate what the countries, what happened 65 years now, and we're still talking about the menacing of the nuclear war. Did you know that since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011 by NATO, led by the President of France in that time, Sarkozy, and the President Obama, has direct impact on the deterioration of democracy and the security in all Sahel and Africa, mainly in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Mauritania, Chad, etc. And at the end of 2021, in Sub-Saharan Africa, there were 27.2 million people living in internal displacement across the region as a result of this conflict and the terrorism in the region, mainly caused by this conflict or this when the Muammar Gaddafi fell, because as you know, Libya was one of the most armed country in Africa. All kind of the arms they are buying. They have oil, they have everything, they have money. And when the fall of Gaddafi, all those arms spread to Africa, creating terrorist groups in different zones of Africa. Democracy should mean responsible governance, justice, rule of law, human rights, civic participation, and the peaceful transfer of the power through electoral process. Since 19th, there have been significant transformation in the political systems in Africa. Many thought that democracy is the magic remedy for all Africans' problems. And from this point of view of the international communities, Africa is evolving because we are doing elections and we go to the multi-partidary system. We don't know exactly how it functions, how it is. But the reality is the following. The development of index, the population living in the condition have not changed satisfactorily. And some nations have plunged in a civil war. Some people used to say that democracy is priceless. But for me, it's debatable. Some examples I will give you of electoral democracy that were costly with no return in terms of solutions. For example, in Mali in 2018, donors gave about 76 million euro to reappoint the president who has been there more than 5 years. And what's happened? 3 years later, after he won the election, the president was deposed through a military coup. So this fund could have been used to build 10 hospitals and improve the security of the country. In Cameroon in 2018, 82 million euro to reappoint a president who has been there since 1962. This amount could have been used to build 530 schools in the country. In Mali, 76 million for the same purpose. The president when he has been elected, a coup d'etat, and the military took the power. And in the name of the democracy, we spent a lot of money organizing election without alternation of the power, and sometimes in dispute, division of the country, civil war. The same people end up winning the election where the results is known in advance. Perhaps we should look to another model of governance. For example, 15 years ago, the United Arab Emirates, specifically Dubai, was a desert place that no one wanted to go there. And 50 years later, it's become something else. Everything was built in benefits for its population and becoming a safe place for the investors worldwide. All this made Western countries change the tone and the way they deal with the Arab countries. Nobody tells them about the democracy. Nobody criticizes them, how they can manage their country, etc. But the problem is, the monarchy has been there since 1932. And the dilemma is to choose between an enlightened monarch in my power since 1932, who helped me regain my dignity, who offers me hope, allow me to myself to heal with a democratic who regularly organize election in birthplace, in offering his youth only the choice to crossing the Mediterranean or committing suicide in Sahara, what we prefer. So, the rules that are applicable elsewhere are not necessarily compatible in an environment that is not switchable. What Africans need is development and well-being for its people. But in this democracy, what Sub-Saharan Africa actually desires for its development, or we need a strong leaders, or we need a strong democracy institutions. I don't know. According to the Economist Intelligence Unit, between 2018 and 2021, the average score of democracy index in Africa fell by 0.24 points, which means that democracy has been in retreat in the region over the past 4 years. The average decline started before onset of the COVID-19, but there are no doubt that the pandemic has had a negative impact on democracy in the region, particularly in 2020, where the authorities in some Sub-Saharan African nations weaponized the COVID-19 pandemic to repress the opposition. So, what is the setback of democracy in Sub-Saharan Africa? First, in terms of the election and the pluralism, the political mobilization and the voting patterns on the ethnic regions dimension resulting in a critical, cyclical ethnic skirmish used by some political party. Turbulence and the discontent from voters, an increase in dubious elections. In terms of citizen rights, the continuing restriction on individual freedoms as a result of the pandemic, it has undermined public trust in institutions and the weakening motivation for political participation. Digital repressions and the internet blackout. You know, in certain countries, during the election process, even during the moment of the voting, internet is cutting off. We have a lot of examples in Africa of this. The other point is a political culture. The lack of compromise sometimes is not allow the government to succeed. As you know, we are a multicultural diversity. The compromise is extremely important. Citizens don't trust anymore in the government, and they believe that democratic governance leads to poor economic performance, abuse of power, and corruption. At the governance level, the reigns of impunity in many African democracies, leaders are not accountable to the people, no respect to the mandate term limits, what we can call as constitutional coup. The independence of the judiciary is still in question, and the opposition is sometimes marginalized. Frustration with the inability of government to adequately address long-standing social and economic problems. At the political participation level, Some important decisions are taken without public consultation. Amendment, state of emergency, etc., etc. The electoral institution, for instance, must be truly independent so the people's vote can count. From this, we arrive at what is the threat to democracy in Sub-Saharan African regions. First one, in my point of view, the lack of leadership and the fragility of democratic institutions that have come to the power through the electoral process. Hunger, poverty, corruption, illiteracy, among others. Military and the constitutional coup. The profound divergence in the society related to the land policies. The deterioration of the security situation in some African countries. Like we said, what happened in Libya and the consequences of this to the African regions. The recruitment of young soldiers in base of ethnic groups and their religious belief. To increase of the ethnic and the religion dimensions in our voting patterns. To conclude my presentation, I want to say this. Instead of all of this, public support for democracy in Africa is still high. However, other forms of government remains attractive to those who see democracy as an impediment to the development. Although Sub-Saharan citizens agree that democracy is preferable to any other form of government, Western-style democracy might not be appropriate for the African context. Countries will therefore have to design their own democracy system and institution to develop. Some say the legitimacy of the powers depend in the last resort of each respect for democratic norm, a Western conception. But some say that the most important thing is the capacity of the state to satisfy the common good of its population. This is the Asian logic. Elections are not enough to guarantee democracy and a better governance. A healthy democracy must include other features, such as government accountability, responsiveness, and civil participation. Trust in democracy, democratic government is sleeping in many African countries. Democracy has really come under threat. This means that the free and the frequent elections are necessary, but are not sufficient to guarantee and guard liberty and development. Even with coup d'etat, conflict, terrorism, etc., is still menacing our continent, there are signs of hope for Sub-Saharan Africa countries to build democracy and peace. Countries that have coup recently, elections are not even on the table, and the citizens are not asking for the election. Very strange. What they are asking for security, jobs, better health, infrastructure, education, electricity, and the roads, etc., etc. And the role of a regional organization, such as ECOWA in West Africa, has been less effective in preventing the extension of the term mandate, but played a major role in opposing military coup. This is the fact. As a prerequisite for viable politics Sub-Saharan African country must begin with fundamental constitutional reforms, which must include the strengthening of the parliament and the other institutions. The internet and the social media are increasingly empowering Africans' youth population to become politically active in Africa. Threat to democracy in Sub-Saharan African region, which is one of the major developmental changes confronting Africa, need to be tackled firmly. But with all of this, I can say some African countries are doing well in terms of economic and the performance and the democracy over the past decade. 6th of the world's 10 fastest growing countries' economy in the world were in Africa. The combination of the growth and the population growth in Africa means that a big future for Africa has not yet been written, and the opportunities is there for business. Thank you.